in the...
Wow, there you go. Yes, everybody, I am back. I'll tell you what, I have been away and I, I have energized myself, put it that way. And it's nice to have Susan back, Susan Leigh back. I've been following her stuff online and everything, and what a brilliant job she's doing online. It's nice to see you again, Susan.
Thank you. Nice to see you too. Nice to be here.
Brilliant, thank you. Um, when I contacted you the other day, we were sorting it. I was saying to you about what kind of like title we can do, and um, and I've been thinking about it all week. You got me thinking about it because there's a big issue, um, you know, and kind of giving people a second chance. Do you believe? You know, do you actually believe giving somebody a second chance is worth it?
Well, I think the topic got kicked off, didn't it, with the whole thing about Kanye West, or Ye, as he now likes to be called, and him being banned from a festival and the festival being cancelled. And should he, it prompted a discussion with a lot of people, should he have had a second chance? And I think for most people, I think a second chance depends on what the initial crime was. If somebody's in an overall angry row argument situation and domestic and what have you, and they're just shouting and things are said, hurtful things are said and perhaps done, depending on the level of abuse, hurt, whatever that's experienced, maybe we can reconcile and understand what's going on. I think it depends on the situation, and there's quite a few levels. Is it work? Is it relationship? Is it personal? Is it public? All those sorts of factors can come in. So I don't think there's a general yes or no. I think it very much depends on what's actually going on in that particular situation and how much it matters to you, whether you want to rescue it, retrieve it.
Yeah. Can you recall a time when you were given a second chance? And how did it affect you?
I think we all have various situations where we've perhaps fallen out with somebody, and it might not have even been a row. It might just have been that we agree to disagree and we walk away, and then we miss that person, that friendship, whatever, and whoever it is, whether it's the me or the other person, we miss that friendship. And if somebody gets in touch and you both sort of say, hey, not spoken for a while, nice to speak to you again, we're almost in that situation. Perhaps we've not worked together for a little while, and then you get in touch and I think, oh yeah, it'd be nice, because you've slept on it, time's gone by, and we never had a falling out, but you can sort of think, oh yeah, okay, I can do that, I can go there, I can revisit it, it's worth it for me, it's worth it for you. And so again, it depends. And I think we've all got, particularly if we're out of our 20s and into our 30s, we've all got experiences and memories of mishaps, slip-ups, serious or not. For day-to-day life, they're often fairly incidental. Somebody didn't do the washing up, or somebody left wet towels on the bathroom floor. And they're perhaps very, very silly examples, but we sort of say, oh, here we go again, and we don't even think that we're giving somebody a second chance. But are we going to rehash it? Are we going to keep saying, Steve or whoever, you said or did this every time there's a minor irritation? Are we going to keep bringing it up? Are we going to let it go? Are we going to move on from it? Or is it going to become a weapon in our back pocket to bring out every time there's, a minor hurt or a situation starts to escalate a little bit?
The trouble is, Susan, though, in this world we live in, it's hard, It's hard to move on, because when somebody kind of like, when when somebody kind of upsets us and everything, or we upset them, and we go and apologize to them, they probably don't want to know, or we don't want to know, but everybody's different in this world, isn't they?
I think somebody coming to apologize for a perceived wrong that they've done us, we have to see that they are, I mean, this is another level as well. We have to see that they are genuinely contrite. If we've been mortally offended by something, we have to see that they mean it. They're not just shrugging it off or paying a lip service. Oh, sorry about that, pat on the head, and off we go again. We have to see that somebody really means it, that they're contrite, that they're trying to make amends, but it isn't becoming a pattern. Because the problem with accepting or delivering a second chance, accepting an apology, can be that it's easier for them to slip into a pattern of they're not that bothered. It really doesn't matter. I'll get away with it. So we have to really see that somebody means what they're saying, is determined to right or wrong, and is trying very hard to, recognizes what they've done, recognizes it was the wrong thing to do, and is trying very hard to rectify that and put it right. And they understand, they're empathic, they appreciate what it meant for us to be treated or spoken to or let down or whatever in that way.
Yeah. So, have you ever had to decide whether to forgive someone who hurt you? What guided your decision about it?
Well, I had somebody who I thought was my very best friend, who I don't particularly need to go into details, but let me down atrociously, really, really, really badly, and our paths kept crossing. And what I tend to do in those situations is if I have to meet somebody, whether it's a work or a recreational or a social or whatever, in-law type family situation, if you're going to be coming across somebody time and time again, then what I personally have done is I've sort of almost recategorized them in my mind, so that from close friend, what I've done is, if you realize it's not going to change and you realize you're in a situation that is ongoing, you can't get out of it, but they're going to still be popping up. What I do is I'm able to be polite, friendly, perceptually friendly, cordial, but I know that they'll never get that close to me again. And for me, it's very much, you maybe kind of forgive. You sort of allow that situation to continue because you have to, but you don't necessarily forget, because you don't want to make yourself that vulnerable again. You don't want to make yourself so receptive that you're giving out signals. Continue kicking me. I don't mind being treated badly, say and do what you like, but you just kind of smile and just move on, and are able to, as I say, I've certainly done that on one or two instances.
Yeah, but it's not nice, though, is it? It's not nice to have that treatment, because I've been told, if someone don't forgive you, then that's their problem.
It might be, and I'm talking about situations where you're going to have to meet them again. Yeah. So if you're going to the same gym or going to the same classes, or you're working in an office situation and you don't want to leave the job, for various reasons it's important to you, or an in-law situation. If you're going to be meeting somebody again, and you can't be kicking off or walking out the room every time, or pulling a face, every time they're there. So, and that would appear childish anyway. You would be the one who would be criticized for being the lesser person. So there are situations where if you're going to keep running into somebody for whether because you have to or because you don't want to change your routines, then being an adult about it is about being smiling, being cordial. And also, one of my favorite sayings is the ultimate revenge, the ultimate knockback is indifference. If you see somebody and you're upset every time you see them, and you're running off to the cloakroom and crying, or going outside for a drink or a smoke or whatever it might be, then they've still got power over you. If you're able to see them and smile and say, hello, how are you? Nice to see you. How did you get on? You're not prolonging the conversation. You're not having an in-depth, detailed discussion about their lives, but you're able to be friendly. It's almost like a business relationship. You're able to be friendly and polite and amiable enough, and then you carry on and live your life, and you're not giving them power over your emotions or over your heart, you know.
So really, then, do you think people can change over time?
I think if something matters enough and we really see what our behavior, what our responses are doing, and we have a vested interest in changing, we want to keep that relationship. It matters to us. We realize we can see how much harm we've done, how much impact our behaviors had on the other person, how upset they are, the consequences of our actions and our words and what have you. I think sometimes you have situations, don't you? I think you see a lot of families nowadays where children are raised and they're taught to have everything they want, and they're little kings and queens. And there are a lot of situations where, if they want it, they get it. Both parents are working perhaps, and that they get looked after really, really well. And in those situations where, at one time a Christmas present for a kiddie might have been a couple of books, these days they're getting the whole bookcase and tech and all sorts of different things with it. So people don't necessarily learn about rejection. They learn about not being wanted. They learn about not being accepted or acceptable. And I've had clients who in their 20s, mid to late 20s, who've never been told no, and completely in bits at the first job that they got, and their boss had the audacity to say this isn't good enough. And so sometimes learning that we are not perfect, learning that everybody else has got an opinion. And this is something about cancel culture, isn't it? And about jokes and everybody being offended by everything. We have to learn that sometimes, we're not going to get what we want in a shop. We're not going to get what we want in a restaurant. We're not going to get treated the way we think we should or expect to be. And being an adult is about learning to accept that and appreciate it and move on from it. And I think second chances come into that, really, where if we are sensible and we're able to take feedback, then I love feedback. If somebody, when I do quite a lot of work for various media organizations, and if somebody says to me that, actually, I remember one time, this is funny, I remember one time, my parents were driving home from a club night somewhere that they used to go to. And they happened to turn on the radio, the BBC radio, and I was on. They didn't know I was on. I never bothered telling them. And my dad afterwards said, "Susan, you really have to stop saying the word really all the time." I think it was either really or absolutely, one of those words, absolutely. And he said, and I could have been offended and upset about it. And I just thought, great, I want feedback. But not everybody is prepared to accept feedback. And I suppose it depends on the context and who it is and how it's meant. But accepting feedback and being able to change and modify comes under the banner to some extent of a second chance, where you are taking it on board and you are actually trying to change and appreciating what's being said or done and the value it has for you, learning from it rather than taking it personally, because that's a big life lesson, is it? Not everything in life is about you. No, and being able to reflect and think other people have opinions too, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's good. Are there certain actions that are unforgivable in your opinion?
Forgivable?
Yeah, unforgivable.
Unforgivable. Well, I think anger can be a very difficult one to quantify. Somebody can get emotional and we can, but we have to learn to perhaps restrain it. Yeah, in a domestic situation, in a close relationship situation, people can get emotional. Somebody wants to get promotion, they should have had it, and the other person gets it. There can be situations where we get incredibly emotional about things. But again, part of becoming an adult is about managing your emotions and being able to filter them. And I suppose one of the things about being overwhelmed by situations is about taking a step back. So I think somebody who is behaving in a bad way, whether they're getting, physical abuse is atrocious, but mental abuse, financial abuse, all those different kinds of things, where we have to perhaps step back and actually calm down and think through what we're doing. So again, I'm a big fan in not reacting too hastily. If you've got a lot to say and you're really angry about it, sleep on it. How many times do we sleep on a situation? Today, that's it. I've had enough. I'm going to say my piece. I'm going to walk away, sleep on it. And the next day, you kind of have a rather different perspective on the whole thing. You're not so reactive. You're not so inflammatory about it. You're not so inflamed. You're able to think it through better. So I think situations that are unacceptable are where people just feel that it's okay. They're entitled to say and do and behave in exactly how they want. But sometimes people with too much power, they can use that in a very abusive, unfortunate way. And just because they've got a lot of money or they are in charge or whatever, yes, they can wield that power, but there has to be a sense sometimes of the two people. Do I need this enough to put up with it? And often domestic situations used to certainly be a lot like that, where, the major breadwinner held the reins because they had all the financial power, and the person who was at home had to do what they were told. Again, I've had clients whose partners used to go through the phones, used to go through the bank statements, used to check the mileage on the car, and there's an awful lot of control in there, and that's not acceptable. But in some situations, people put up with it because they feel they have no alternative, and that's very difficult. But fortunately, in a lot of instances, that is a less of a power structure these days.
Yeah, what do you think about that? Because that was the next question on my list about people taking control.
Why they do?
Yeah, why do they?
Why? It's because, well, the sarcastic comments made about the person's, size in every way, or it's a power thing. They perhaps, a lot of things go back to how you were raised and what you expected. And so sometimes people who felt undervalued will compensate and become bullies. And sometimes people who are cosseted can become, I should be, do you know who I am? And they feel they're entitled too. So a lot of that can come back from background and also getting away with it. And if they don't meet their match, and if other people give in, acquiesce too easily, then you set a toxic pattern in place. You set a pattern in place of controller and controllee,
Yeah.
And oftentimes, if you don't have the confidence, or you can't be bothered, sometimes people get that worn down over a period of time that they just think, "Whoa, that's my life. That's what I've got to put up with." And so they don't perhaps see there's an alternative. And for some people, initially, there's not, particularly if young children are involved, they can feel that they have to put up with a situation because of the domestic situation and what's involved. The kids will have to leave the school, or where will we live? What will happen? We won't have any money for food. All that. There is nobody around to help us. We've moved away, so my immediate family's not nearby. There can be lots of situations where that comes under that banner.
Yeah. Would you give a second chance differently to a close friend or a family member than to a stranger?
Would I give a second chance to a family member?
Yeah.
Or a close friend?
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned earlier about somebody who I thought was my best friend who behaved, there were about 3 or 4 times where over a period of about 18 months that she'd intermittently come out and apologize. I'd be leaving and she'd come after me and say, "Susan, I feel I really need to say I'm so sorry because I've been behaving really badly." And there were about 2 or 3 times where we hugged and that was it and carried on. And then, there was a really bad situation about 2 years ago that, she completely excluded me from something that was really important. And I'd been there that day and she'd just not even mentioned it. And after that, I just thought, I can't, I don't need this anymore. So I think we can get pushed to our limits. And I think a reasonable person can accept that a friend might be stressed, they might have a lot going on, they might be overwhelmed, they might have all sorts of different catastrophes going in their lives, they might be drunk. Alcohol can often be involved. It can be a whole series of reasons why somebody behaves badly. And most of us, I think, are prepared to go there, but for the grace of God, that could have been me. maybe I misinterpreted what was being said or done. So I think most of us are prepared to give somebody a second chance. But if we're up to third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh chance, then I think the conversation becomes a little bit different, and we have to decide and accept that sometimes not every relationship that we have lasts the course. Some relationships in our lives are only there for the duration. They're only there for a couple of years or so. That can happen with a love interest, a marriage or partnership of any kind, that sometimes it's a stepping stone, and then at some point we move on again. And you find that with young people, they go to university, they make some really solid relationships, but then when they get partnered perhaps and maybe move away, get promoted, start building a business, a career, and then children come along, there can be lots of different phases in our lives where we enter different sets of relationships for a whole variety of reasons, and that applies in so many situations, and that's okay. It's accepting it sometimes, but sometimes a second chance isn't necessary because it's just not relevant anymore. The relationship really doesn't mean, or all the goodness is gone. We've cut all the bad bits off the apple, and there's not an awful lot left now, and it's sort of time to throw it in the recycling and just let it go.
So, do you believe in the idea of redemption? I did a poll the other day on this for a few people on Twitter. I'll let you have a look at it later. And it was really our opinion about redemption is the most people voted on. What do you think?
Well, by redemption, what do you mean? That somebody changes their behavior?
Yes. Yeah.
I think as I said before, if somebody really has a good look at themselves in the mirror and realizes what they've done, realizes the impact it has on other people, realize often self-interest is involved as well, so realize the impact it has on their lives, the consequences as a result of their behavior, their actions, or whatever. When we see the impact thing our bad stuff has on other people, sometimes it can be a mind-blowing moment where we suddenly go, heck, I hadn't really seen it that way. I hadn't really thought about it like that. I didn't realize how much it affected you. So yeah, I think people don't necessarily chase redemption just because they suddenly wake up one morning and decide they're going to be a better person. I think, it's a bit like New Year's resolutions. We can all start off and say, that's it, I'm going to lose half a stone, or I'm going to cut out booze, or I'm going to, I don't know, visit my parents once a week, or whatever it might be. But life gets in the way sometimes, and we don't always see, or, we let it slide a bit and then it's gone, So, yeah, I think if people have a vested interest in improving, then they potentially will. But it takes about 4 weeks to set in place a new habit. So you have to really stick at it and want it and persevere to take roots and grow and become a part of your mindset, an automatic part of your behavior pattern. And these things can take time to be nurtured and grow and become a part of us.
So how important is trust and patience? Because surely you've got to have both of them, to concede whether somebody should get a second chance.
I think to give somebody a second chance, we have to see that they genuinely are contrite. Yeah. They really appreciate what they've done, what's happened. We have to perhaps acknowledge why the behavior happened in the first place. What was going on? Why did this occur? What did you do? What did I do? Have I got a role in this to play? Am I doing something that, it's accepting our own input into a situation too? What did I do that made you, that encouraged you, that taught you that it was acceptable to say or do these things? So looking at the whole situation and deciding that the relationship is important to us. But I do think that often if we get treated badly a few times, that we, as I said before, we almost recategorize, we review the relationship and perhaps don't see it the same way. Because if you get really hurt badly by a situation, by a person, you don't get the job, you keep getting passed over for promotion, you keep getting excluded from things. Eventually, you'll just say, hey, I'm not that much of a masochist. I really don't need this that much in my life. I'm going to get a bit of personal confidence. I'm going to work on my self-esteem and say, I don't need this anymore. And I think that can happen. I think that can happen over time where we realize, do we want this anymore? No, we don't.
Okay. So, I was going through a personal problem a few months ago, and I was kind of thinking, oh no, I don't know what I'm doing. Why should I forgive this person? Why should I do that? And it's like, should I give them another chance after they hurt me? They really did hurt me. They hurt me in a big way. That's the problem, Susan, isn't it? When people kind of hurt us in a big way, then it's kind of like saying, you know, should I forgive that person, or should I just ignore them and walk away? What is the best? What's the
Well,
best
I think you're not on your own in this either, because the other person's there too. So you're getting some input from the other person potentially too. So there's an opportunity maybe to say, look, can we meet for a coffee somewhere neutral outside or in a coffee house or whatever? Can we meet somewhere for an hour and have a chat? And then avoid being accusatory, but just say, look, I'm very aware that we had a good relationship, but one or two things seem to have gone wrong. How do you feel about it? So we're not saying you make me feel, or when you did this, I felt such a thing. It is about being open and opening the conversation to talk about it. So how do you feel? What's going on? And if you value that person, if you felt they were important enough in your life, then you can sit down and discuss. But it depends then on what they want to. It's not just all about one person in that situation. It's about saying, we did have a great time. We did have a lot of fun together. We did have a good relationship. We achieved a lot together. I'm aware that seems to be fading. Can we talk about it? What's your perception? How do you see it? What happened for you? And they may say to you, you may not have realized, but they may say, well, you always seem to be unavailable when I called, or it was always me who phoned you or got in touch with you, or whatever. There can be a lot of different reasons that they see as being contributory factors in the breakdown of the relationship, in the reason why they treated you the way they did. So sometimes a little bit of investigation can perhaps help save that relationship. And sometimes both parties can grow as a consequence, because you both see each other's perspective on something that perhaps before you hadn't realized.
Yeah, but then it's like the both parties were going to like a blame game, then, weren't they? They'd be kind of like blaming each other.
Well, I think times like that, you have to avoid, as I said a minute ago, avoid blame and agree not to keep. I mean, I hear so many times when I do couples counseling, these situations can develop into, well, I only said that because you said this. Yeah, but that only happened because your mum and dad and whatever interfered, and go round and round and round and round in examples which keep getting regurgitated time after time after time. And there has to be somebody who says, look, let's cut through that. Let's stay with the main points. And that's where sometimes having a mediator, somebody to mediate, whether it's a family friend or your rabbi or priest or whoever it might be, somebody everybody feels comfortable with. But sometimes having somebody to keep the conversation on track, if it's worthwhile doing it, to stop all the blame and to stop all the examples and stop all the rehashing. Because that's something I mentioned right at the outset. If we're giving somebody a second chance, what can happen is that every time there's a trigger, every time something happens, it's mildly irritating or reminiscent of the initial offense. It can be that, oh, hang on a minute, here we go again, and we're back to square one, and you're doing that. You've got to stop. You've got to agree not to do that. You've got to agree to say, I might be forgiving, but I'm not going to keep rehashing either. Might not necessarily forget, but I'm not going to keep digging it up over and over and over again.
Yeah. So what do you think about people who are religious and they have, because I, as you know, I've gone to church and Christian and everything. What do you think about people who are Christians and they got to kind of like forgive or, forgive and forget anyway? It's in their blood, but really deep inside, they must be feeling, terrible too because they've been hurt. So how
Well,
can we?
they're
Yeah,
all human beings, aren't we? We're all human beings. And I think, I was raised Roman Catholic and I used to go to confession, communion, benediction, all sorts of different. I was taught by nuns till I was 18. So
yeah,
the whole backdrop to that is that you have a sort of certain sense of perhaps being imperfect and the need to confess or be contrite or whatever. But yes, we might be forgiving, but we're human beings. We're not automatons. So yes, people might do wrong by us and we might try to be a good person. But again, it's about keeping that mindful awareness and being forgiving and forgetting is not the same as being a doormat. It's not the same as sticking a sign on your forehead saying mug or kick me now because, it is about having a certain amount of dignity. It's about expecting and being prepared to lay claim to being treated properly. We're entitled to be treated with respect. And if people aren't doing that, then it's okay to say, hang on a minute, I don't like this. It's not good for me. And finding the right words to use in the right context for that is important. But we can say what we can lay claim to being treated appropriately. It doesn't mean that we have to be a doormat or a punching bag or whatever it is, and that somebody's allowed to treat us with disdain and be dismissive of us and our needs.
yeah, yeah. Because do you believe second chances are tricky morals to society?
Sorry?
Um, sorry.
I didn't quite hear what you said.
Yes, sorry. Do you believe that second chances are sorry. Sorry about that. Just made a mistake. Choosing to accept somebody back into your life when somebody's done wrong will be difficult. And if after a while, if they kind of like, if there's no forgiveness on both sides, then at the end of the day, you just walk away. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes, as I said initially, depending on what the crime is or was, depending on how important that situation is to us, that relationship, that job, that contract, whatever it might be, depending on all those different factors, we can sometimes allow it just to be shrugged off and forgotten about. Somebody has a slip up, they say or do something, if somebody borrows your jacket and you get it back and there's a big burn on it. I mean, this is a silly example, but a big burn on it. And they're really contrite and they say, look, I'm going to take it and try and get it fixed. And I'm so sorry. And I didn't mean for it to happen. You may forgive them for that, even if it is a special jacket of yours. But you might, at the back of your mind, be deciding, I'm not going to lend them anything that important to me again. So apart from that decision at the back of your mind and that wariness, or loaning money or whatever, you loan somebody money and you don't get it back, then there can be a sense of, okay, well, I'll write it off. They've always been good to me. I'm fine about it, but I won't lend them again. So we can forgive the situation, but it doesn't mean that we, and still keep that person in our life, but it doesn't mean that we will necessarily repeat that behavior, that same mistake again. It means sometimes that we will be a little bit more wary about how open we are about everything. So it does teach us. I think sometimes when something happens like that, it teaches us to be a little bit more wary, a little bit more guarded, perhaps, about not being quite as open as we've been before.
Yeah, yeah. Change, kind of like changing your attitude to life, changing even yourself.
Yeah.
It's a big thing because
I tend to call that boundaries. We may not have had any boundaries before, but over time we might learn to say, okay, that situation, somebody comes and they behave really badly in front of your friends. They get drunk, or they swear, or they tell lousy jokes, or they hit on the people in the party, or whatever it might be, the provocative, we might say, I love them, but actually in future, I'm not going to include them in those get-togethers. So we can still forgive their behavior and say, I love them, but I don't want that to happen again. And a lot of people will have different groups of friends for different situations. The Parent Teachers Association friends might be great in that corner, in that context, but you might not necessarily include them with your work-related friends or your squash club friends or whatever it might be. And that's okay. So we will have, and we may at one point have included everybody together and seen that it doesn't get on. And some people might have behaved badly, unfortunately, whatever, but we are clear in our minds that we still want all those people, but not necessarily in that free-for-all context situation anymore.
Yeah, it's difficult. How do your culture or your personal values influence your willingness to forgive somebody?
How do what? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. How do your cultural or personal values influence your willingness to forgive somebody?
I suppose cultural will be what prescribe the people that you mix with in the first place, probably. Who you come into contact with might be part of your social sphere, your social group. So yeah, I suppose the people that you mix and meet with are predetermined by the circles that you go in anyway. So we're not necessarily collecting random people along the way. I mean, we might do, but in terms of where we work, in terms of where we exercise, in terms of where we meet, walking around the park with the dog every morning, and we bump into different people, all those various situations will automatically determine initially from the outset how relatable we feel to the people that we're coming into contact with and how far we want to take those relationships. So it can be that we meet people and are quite happy with them, but we wouldn't necessarily have them in our homes, or we wouldn't necessarily take it any further and go for coffee even, or spin it out to a 2-hour lunch, or whatever it might be that we enjoy the limitations of that particular situation, that environment that we find ourselves in, and that can be good enough. Again, I go for a walk in the morning along the canal, and I've got certain people that I meet every day pretty well, and I'm friendly with them. And there is a difference between being friendly and a friend. Being friendly, hello, how are you? How's it going? You might know a few bits and pieces about them, but would you take it further? Well, that depends. Yeah. And then there are other people who you start warming to and start saying, all right, let's go for coffee, let's go for lunch. And at that, you might realize, actually, this is fun, but I don't need it any further. So they're the automatic parameters that we're set into place when we're mixing and meeting with people, enjoying them. But contextually, is this how far, or do we want to take it further? And that's okay. That's part of life. You might have I know people who say everybody they meet is a friend. Well, I would disagree. I'd say a lot of people that we meet are friendly people. They're not necessarily bosom buddies who we would share our personal life story with, or our secret fears and thoughts and fantasies.
Yeah. I heard a song once from Charlie Lansborough. He said you'd be lucky to have 3 friends in this world.
Yeah.
True friends.
Yeah, some people will say they have 2 or 3 friends, people who, have been with them all their lives. Some people will have friends from primary school right the way through, or they carry them and keep those relationships maintained all the way along. Other people sort of spring clean their friends from time to time and let them go. And I've written articles about that, where it can come a time where we don't necessarily need to be doing the old Christmas card list that's up to 200 or 300 now. And it's time sometimes to just spring clean a bit and filter some of those out. So just accepting that sometimes, and that's okay,
Okay, we have got a few questions before you go. I know you're very busy, and thank you very much for coming on. Deborah is left me a message. She's saying, "Hi Steve, really enjoyed it. Welcome back. Can you ask Susan What did she think about the state of the world at this moment in time? Do you think we are going to go to war? Mm,
I don't think I it's a difficult one, and politics. I have very strong opinions about this. I think sometimes we need to be clear. I mean, personally, I despair about the UK. I despair about Britain at the minute, and I despair. But I also think that if here, it depends who's going to step up instead of Starmer or whoever is around. So I just think the situation at the minute, in with our government, with the world as it is, we are in a state of flux, and I don't necessarily think anybody particularly wants to go to war. I don't think Trump necessarily wants to go to war. I think he is a businessman who likes to throw his weight around, and oftentimes it's worked for him. And in this situation, I suspect he is now regretting it and has gone too far. But at the end of the day, it's a difficult one. So I don't think anybody particularly wants to go to war. And I think there are alternatives being mooted, aren't there, with pipelines now being opened
yeah,
up under the sea to let oil through. So it might not be as critical as was initially flagged up. But yeah, hey ho.
yeah. Um,
I mean, we've got a situation changing in Hungary now, haven't we? Where
oh,
there's
yes,
now 16-year president, prime minister, whatever is gone, and now a new regime setting in place. So there's an awful lot of flux. It's a time of a lot of change. And I think our country is beginning to change for the better. I do think people are starting to wake up. I think people are starting to say what they want more. And, you know, the silent majority that is put up with things for a long, long time, we're now starting to find a bit of a voice and say, hang on a minute, we're up to about our 73rd chance now. So let's be treated properly for a change.
yeah, yeah. Um, do you believe? Do you believe really in your mind that somebody can change?
I think if they want to, I think, yeah, as I said before, it can take 4 or 5 weeks for a new habit, a new behavior to set into place. But yeah, I think people have to want to change. I think it can be, we can do it if we really want to. That there has to be a motivation, a motivator for it. But ultimately, if we feel it's worthwhile doing, there has to be a win-win. It's not just all you winning or all me winning. I think these situations have to be a win-win for all concerned. And I think as a consequence of that, then people can be prepared to change. But yeah, ultimately we tend to default. I mean, I remember, as I said, I was raised Roman Catholic, and I remember way back being told that the confession that a lot of Catholics make every time they go is the same, because we tend to repeat our sins. I was bad-tempered, I was rude to my mom, I pinched my brother or whatever it was, and we tend to repeat the same thing. So we default to our comfort zone, our comfortable behaviors. But yes, at the end of the day, it can be that if we feel, we can perhaps learn to moderate it. We can learn to be less reactive. We can learn to step back a little bit and suddenly think, hang on a minute, I need to calm down. I need to go and breathe a bit. I need to sleep on it. I need to think about what I want. I need to think about what's going to happen as a consequence of me doing that. And oftentimes, another of the examples that I use is, supposing little Johnny is at school and he's got his finger up his nose and he's there, and it's revolting, and he's 4 or 5 years of age, and the girl that he likes, the little girl that he likes, 2 rows in front, turns around and goes, horror, horror. He's not going to do that again, because he's had an instant feedback of a reaction that he suddenly realizes, oh my goodness me, that's awful and not acceptable, and look at her reaction, and he will learn not to do that again. Now, it can be that if we have reactions like that over different things that we do, and we realize the fallout from doing that is unfortunate, then we may modify our behavior. So if I learn that every time I get angry and I shout and say, this isn't right, and I kick off, I might get away with it once or twice, but after 2 or 3 times, my friends will not be asking me out again. If every time I go out with them, I behave badly and I'm shouting, or I'm being bad-tempered, or I'm getting too drunk, or whatever it might be. If every time I go out with my friends, they're having to handle me sensitively or with kid gloves or walk around me with, on eggshells, they won't ask me out after a while. So I will. So if there are consequences to our bad behavior, we don't need a second chance. We realize we've had them all. And if we want to continue, we have to learn to behave in a more acceptable, more user-friendly way.
Yeah. Caroline says, I've been, I heard every single, sorry, I heard every single thing tonight, and I think this is brilliant. Will there be further? I do not know yet. I will speak to Susan about it. She has been really busy lately, so um, I heard Susan the other day on the BBC on the radio. Is she doing any TV lately in the
I haven't
pipeline?
got any. I don't even know when I'm on the BBC again. I mean, I'm on various lists for them,
Yeah,
and I'm there in inverted commas, an expert on particular subjects, and I can't even think at the minute if I've got a date. I tend to be on several different stations, from 5 Live right the way through. Haven't got any television lined up. I haven't really done much TV. But at the end of the day, they tend to phone me up and say, will you come on? So I do once a month on one of the Midlands stations. I'm regularly on Hereford and Worcester. I don't know. I do. I've done Scotland a few times, Ireland a few times, London. So it just depends. They tend to phone me up if they've got a topic. I mean, Second Chances was an article, was a consequence of me doing a BBC interview about this a week or two ago,
yeah.
after Kanye West and that. So, yeah. So,
Are
yeah,
you? Are
I'm
you?
on when they ask me.
Yeah. Are you? Are you? I've got a question here. Are you a person who is controversial?
Controversial.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I can be. I have opinions about certain things that, yeah, I mean, I can be. I know what I think about things. Excuse me. But yeah, I think a lot of. I mean, I was a conspiracy theorist back at the beginning of all the COVID thing, and lost one or two friends as a consequence of that. But I tend not to shout about it. I tend to just say that's my opinion, a bit like Djokovic. I this is how I feel. This is what I'm doing. I've
Mm,
investigated what I'm thinking and feeling, and I've done a lot of research into my opinions. And whether if that's seen as controversial, so be it. But my age, my time of life, I've got to a stage where I do research things and I do look into things, and the way I feel, I can justify. But I'm also very happy to hear other people's opinions. I've got a very good friend who disagrees with a lot of my views, and I can't understand why she thinks and feels the way she does. And so we have interesting conversations sometimes. But it's about being respectful and about allowing space for both of you to have those different views.
yeah. Brilliant. Anyway, guys, that's enough of your questions. I'd like to thank Susan Lee and guys. What can I say? I love to listen to you, Susan, and what she comes out with and everything. Because the trouble is, we all need a Susan Lee in our world, don't we? And we do, Susan. We do. Um, um, Before I go, guys, change. About people changing. Well, at the end of the day, we all can change, but we really, really we got to mean to change. We just don't go around saying, right, okay, I'm going to change tomorrow. I've been an alcoholic for 6 years or something, and tomorrow it's going to be, you know, we really got to mean to change, because you know, if we're asking people for second chances, then we've got to give something back, and that is to keep the promise that we are going to change in this world, because no one else can do it for you. You've got to change yourself. Good night. God bless. Thank you, Susan, very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. There you go.